And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs. If you can see this on YouTube, I am Chris Clark, not Ryan Tracy. Did not get the background change. That's my fault. I will have that for next time. But always a pleasure to have Matt Derrick on. Thank you, Matt, for being here. A little bit of what we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about Tyreek Hill. We're going to talk about the additions that the Chiefs are having in Josh Gordon and Willie Gay. I think those could both be very big things. I do want to thank you all for making Locked On Chiefs your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, so be sure to check us out wherever you would like to listen, or go watch us on YouTube. Appreciate that.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
A little bit of a busy day for you, huh, Matt?
Yeah, it's supposed to be an off day for the Chiefs on Tuesday, but it wasn't exactly an off day. There was a lot of transactions going on.
Isn't the way that works usually? It's always funny because Ryan and I usually will say, okay, well, nothing's going to happen today, and then, of course, something happens. Today is Travis Kelce's birthday, or yesterday was Travis Kelce's birthday, depending on when you're listening to this. But one of the transactions was, it looks like Josh Gordon is going to be on the active roster for the Buffalo game. I think that kind of surprises me. I would have expected that they would have used the practice squad elevation, but they're going this way.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a possibility that the team has this kind of arranged with the player and the agent ahead of time. That because remember, yeah, it's nice to be able to have that flexibility to just promote somebody from the practice squad, and although, hey, if you do that, you get paid game money. At the same time, you don't get all the benefits of being on the 53 roster, especially when it comes to service time and some of those things. So sometimes it's worked out that way. And I could certainly see, hey, some other teams around the league being Josh Gordon's on a practice squad. We can go sign him. So there's always a few things that could be going on behind the scenes. I think this is definitely an indication that, one, the Chiefs feel like he's ready. Two, yeah, there was probably something contractually that made this happening a little bit faster than maybe would have expected. But I think as a Chiefs fan, it should be good news, because I don't think the Chiefs would be doing this if they didn't feel like that they were comfortable with Josh Gordon coming in and they didn't feel like he could do something right now.
Well, and you look at what that's going to mean for this team. One of the things that I want to get into in another segment is talking about Tyreek Hill, and then honestly looking at how this is going to affect Tyreek Hill, because I think it's really going to help him a lot. But you look at Josh Gordon, and somebody was sending out a picture on Twitter about how he looked, his physique, and that is impressive for a guy his size. 235 pounds, 7% body fat. I mean, it's just insanely impressive. And you're sitting here looking at a wide receiver that legitimately could be a number one if he's able to stay healthy and able to get through an entire season, a number one on many teams in this league.
Yeah, and I mean, the physicality, I mean, you understand why, what was it, Tyrann Mathieu decided he looks a little bit like Megatron. Mm-hmm. Certainly if you're Tyrann Mathieu's size, he probably does. But even then, I mean, looking at Josh Gordon and that Chiefs receiver group on the practice field, Marcus Kemp and Reese Fountain were the only two that could give him a run for size. But even then, I mean, you can tell that Josh Gordon's just another type of physical specimen. Probably stands out in the same kind of way that I would say that like a Passanio stands out. A little bit different. I mean, Josh Gordon's on a different level, let's face it, but definitely is one of those guys that, at least when we're watching from a practice field, he looks like an alien, because he just doesn't look like the other guys that are around him.
And that's a good thing, because you're sitting here looking at a roster full of guys that are playing in the NFL, and he looks like an alien, which means he's above and beyond those guys. And you're getting him in the fifth week of the season, and he's basically just an addition at this point to things that you wouldn't have expected to get. So I think it's going to be a boon for Kansas City. I'll be interested to see how much he plays, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the Chiefs also made another addition, or a little bit of an addition. They added Willie Gay via they're designating him to practice at this point.
Yeah, that's going to start the 21-day clock for him to be able to practice before he returns to the active roster. And I would expect that he probably won't play this week. I mean, remember, he's gone more than a month without playing. And I think it might take more than just 3 practices to get him up to speed. So I would not be surprised at all if the Chiefs just want to get him on the field, get his feet wet a little bit here. See how he's doing next week. I think it's a lot to expect for him to be able to come back and get on the field for just 3 practices. So I think they want to take it easy with him for a little bit. Let's see what happens next week. I think that's a lot more likely of a date to circle for maybe when Willie Gay can come back. And remember, with him returning to practice, doesn't count on the active roster, so they'll have to clear a roster spot for him. And remember, right now, I mean, with Josh Gordon coming in and Josh Kando going to IR, they're carrying 7 wide receivers. So that's a little out of the norm in the NFL. So something will probably change with that receiver group here in the next couple of weeks. And Willie Gay that's probably going to be coincide with him returning to the 53 as well.
And if you were going to bet on it, which it sounds like you're betting on next week as opposed to this week, one of the places you can go bet on it at is BetOnline.ag. We're back and better than ever. All eyes are on the Gridironers. Teams are back on for another football season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With a new updated site and interface and even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline continues to be the number one source for everything football. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so we've already talked about Josh Gordon a little bit, but let's go ahead and dive into it just a little bit more. When you start looking at the week that Tyreek Hill had, he had this huge game where he has 3 touchdowns and 180 yards receiving, 11 or 13 receptions, somewhere in there. And, I mean, monster numbers from the number one wide receiver for the Chiefs, and yet he doesn't really have somebody across from him that is taking coverage away. I mean, it's Travis Kelce, but you're adding a guy that I think has more talent. And I hate going there, but more talent than Sammy Watkins. I mean, Watkins is a different wide receiver, but it's ridiculous. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it should be. I mean, I go back to 2018, beginning of that season when, you had Sammy Watkins, you had Kareem Hunt, and this team was averaging 7 yards a play. I mean, you're probably talking about having comparable talent on the field again at the skill positions that the Chiefs had back then. So, I mean, coming off a game where you score on 6 of the 7 possessions where you were trying, I mean, to me, I think this is just the rich getting richer. This could really work out. I mean, I still say the range of outcomes for Josh Gordon are pretty wide, and some of that's certainly on Josh himself. I mean, he's going to have to do the things that he has to do to stay in this league, which has been a struggle for him in the past. But if he does, he's proven that he can always be effective. And absolutely, I mean, his presence should make life easier for both Tyreek Hill and for Travis Kelce. I mean, doing a lot of the same things that Sammy Watkins did. Because to me, I mean, the Chiefs are not going to be asking him to do the things that like a Demarcus Robinson or McCole Hardman does. Not going to ask him to line up in 3 different spots. I mean, they're going to probably just focus primarily on that X position. Let him, run some of the routes that he's most comfortable with. Maybe do some of the same things that Sammy Watkins did as far as underneath, trying to clear things out. I mean, it's going to be difficult to ask Gordon to run a lot of pick plays or anything of that nature that are too complicated. But his mere presence is going to free up people. I mean, you put him, Kill, and Kelce on the field at the same time, pick your poison. I mean, we're seeing right now that teams are trying to take away both those guys. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you add Gordon to the mix, and even if he can just contribute a little bit, I think it's going to make life easier for a lot of those guys. And to Hill specifically, I thought that this was, the most that maybe Tyreek had to really work for 186 yards this week. I think he had 47 yards after the catch. It felt like a lot more than that. But I really felt like, he had to work to get himself open, and the Chiefs were really kind of working to get him involved after a couple of quiet weeks. It's not going to be that way when you got Josh Gordon. I don't think you're going to have to work as hard to get Hill open.
No, and it's going to open up everything for everybody else as well. You start looking at what it's going to do for a guy like McCole Hardman. It's going to open up the running game as well, because then you're going to be able to run the ball even better, which I think Kansas City has shown that they are able to do now, which I think is very encouraging for this offense going forward. So you sit here and you look at it. Josh Gordon, I don't have the direct time, but it looks like everything I'm looking at, he ran a 4.3, somewhere around the 4.3 when he was coming out of college. The insane speed on this team is just so much fun to watch. And 4.3 or near 4.3 at his size is just absolutely phenomenal. So the other thing that I'm looking forward to with him is he has some catches that are just unbelievable as well. I mean, he can track the ball. He can do just about anything you want a wide receiver.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of envisioned, especially watching some of the things that the Eagles were doing on Sunday. Their safeties were playing in such a way as to just say, look, we're not going to let Tyreek Hill behind us.
Mm-hmm.
So you can throw all the play action you want to. As a safety, we're not biting. So if teams are going to have those safeties play back, and now you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire going for 100 yards in back-to-back games. Hey, you can have your safeties playing deep all you want to, but if your linebackers are going to have to respect that running game, suddenly there's a middle of the field that's going to be wide open. And Josh Gordon's a guy who can live in the middle of the field. So, to me, yeah, if you've got Hill on the outside going deep, keeping the safeties preoccupied, you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire on an RPO, suddenly both Gordon and Kelsey, I mean, those guys should be absolutely able to just feast on some of the matchups they'll see over the middle.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and then you have that other guy named Travis Kelsey who's pretty good about eating stuff in the middle of the field as well. So I do think that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm curious to see how they're able to sprinkle Gordon into this offense. And I do think that week one, maybe he gets 10 plays, maybe he gets 15. It's going to depend on how much he knows. It's also going to depend on how the game goes, because I'm sure they're only going to have packages for certain types of different plays. But I do think he could bring another dynamic to this offense that's already scary right now as is. So I'm looking forward to that. And you brought up Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think that it's interesting to me to watch his progression as a runner, and he's got 2 back-to-back 100-yard games, and he's great running the ball. But I think he's even better as a wide receiver, and they still haven't really used him as that.
Yeah, and that can absolutely be a factor, going forward too. I mean, I've been really interested in some of the comparisons and maybe between Clyde and Kareem Hunt, and maybe it's even, like I said, maybe it's even easier to compare them now to a degree, because I mean, we're talking about having the same type of personnel at the skill positions that when Hunt was his most successful, that the Chiefs also had around him too. But, I still think the biggest difference is that Clyde's getting used to this offensive line, and this offensive line's getting used to him. He's only, I think, just now maybe getting to play with an offensive line that you could compare to the same group that Kareem had. Kareem had a pretty good offensive line, especially with Fisher and Schwartz out there. This offensive line's been a work in progress, but you know what? They're starting to look like they're getting it together. And if this run game the last couple of weeks is indicative of that, and now you throw in the ability to have Gordon, suck up a little bit more oxygen from the defense, yeah, I mean, it should absolutely. I mean, I think that it's entirely possible that Clyde's going to see more and more light boxes. And if that's the case, they should be able to run on teams. And that's why I say, I mean, the Chiefs going back to the days where they're running up and down the field at 7 yards a clip. What I saw from this team on Sunday against the Eagles, and then adding Josh Gordon to that, it's entirely possible. Maybe not day one, but by the end of the season, if Gordon fits in with this team the way we think he will, yeah, I mean, this offense could be cooking if they stay healthy.
Well, and that's the key, is they have to stay healthy. But then you start looking at, you're right, talking about Clyde. When Kansas City can run the ball like they do, like they have the past couple of weeks, and Andy Reid is going to more of at least a closer 50-50 split between run pass, which you never see from Andy Reid. That's just insane. And I think that's going to play into this, that could play into this game against the Bills, because if Kansas City can find a way to get a lead early and start running the clock because they're running the ball and they're consistently getting, 3 or 4 yards a carry at least, they're going to be in business in this game.
Yeah, and and going to Clyde, I mean, one of the things that you mentioned, and I should have talked about more about it from the receiving standpoint, is the one thing that Kareem had on him was that I think Kareem was a little bit more polished as a downfield receiver and a player, and that's the one thing that we really haven't. I do think that the Chiefs have underutilized Clyde in the passing game. And I think their expectation all along was, being able to get him involved in the screen game, which has been something that they haven't leaned on as much the last couple of years as they have in the past. But Kareem was just, so good on some seam routes and being able to get downfield. And that's the one thing that I don't know that Clyde was asked do a lot in college. I mean, he did a lot of stuff, in short yardage. kind of mid-level as far as catching the football. If he could, add that other element to his game, I mean, once again, I mean, there's going to be opportunities when there are so many guys on the field getting covered that if he can start making a major impact in the passing game, I mean, he could really start to maybe, get closer to that breakout that people were expecting with the first round pick.
Yeah, I think it still could be coming. I think that this offensive line is going to help him get to the next level as a running back. And then you start looking at how he can affect the game as a receiving back as well. I think that's going to be very key for Kansas City. When we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Tyreek Hill and the game that he had. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30 to 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpets. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Now, when we start going back and looking at this game from Tyreek Hill, I'm very glad that you brought up the fact that he really worked for a lot of these yards, because he did. And the play that really sticks out to me is he could have had a fourth touchdown.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what he was thinking with the way he tried to score it, but that was a fun play.
Yeah, and probably lucky that he did not extend the football with the other hand, because I think if he did, he might have fumbled before he got to the pylon. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, and that's why I said I'm surprised that he didn't have more yards after the catch. Like I said, I think he had 47, 48 yards. It felt like maybe a little bit more than that. But I once again, I mean, I go back to with Tyreek, I mean, just how hard he's worked off the field over the last few years to improve as a receiver, and you see it on plays like that. I mean, that's not some of the especially a play like that where he's got to change directions and then run across the field. I mean, those are not entirely things that are innate. I mean, you've got to learn that. I mean, you've got to learn the hip turn and how you can make a move like that and outdistance guys. I mean, he's got the speed to do it, but speed's not purely alone what you need in a situation like that. So, I mean, I just go back to all the hard work that I know that Tyreek has put in the offseason over the last few years to try to improve as a receiver, improve especially his breaks. And I think that was Sunday's a great example of that, because, I mean, for all the cracks that people get about, whether or not Tyreek's an elite top number one receiver, I mean, one of the top three in the league to me for sure, maybe top two.
Right.
And I don't see how you could see otherwise. And days like Sunday are great examples, because those were not just Tyreek using his speed. I mean, that was Tyreek using his entire arsenal of tools. And not all of them are speed. I mean, a lot of them are just, how he sets up routes, how he runs them, hips, feet. I mean, everything. And those are things that he's absolutely worked hard on over the last few seasons.
And that's the key for what I've seen for his progression. Is one of the things that he has gotten so much better at from when he came out of college is route running. And you talked about breaks. That is absolutely important. But his route, and that's included in the route running as well, but the route running has been something that has just taken off. And when you get that kind of speed that can run precise routes and be exactly where he's supposed to be, or, not rounding things off, that is huge for an offense. That is huge for a player, especially with his speed, to be able to do that type of thing and basically be, changing direction and almost back at full speed almost immediately.
Yeah, it is. And, because not a lot of guys can do that. I mean,
right.
I mean, speed is definitely something that can't be taught. I mean, you have to have that. But, and a great example, I mean, with Tyreek's abilities to change directions and route running, is that catch that he made against Tampa Bay last year, when he had the help from Watkins kind of free him up. I asked, Tyreek, I'm like, could you have made that route 3 years ago? And he said, no. That's the kind of thing that you do pick up. And, and I think we've seen that more and more. The really fun thing for Chiefs fans is going to be that Josh Gordon's the same kind of guy. I mean, he can also change direction and he can do those kinds of things. And he's continued to work. I mean, Josh Gordon would not be in the situation that he's in, the position that he's in right now, if he had not continued to work on his own and be ready. So, I'm really curious to see what those two guys can do on the field, because could not be more light and day different. But at the same time, the one commonality that they have is that they are both physical freaks, and really, really curious to see how those skills are going to pair together on a football field together.
And then you look at the thing that we didn't really get to see from Tyreek on Sunday, and it's his ability to go after the ball when it's in the air. I am just sitting here thinking back to a game against the Houston Texans, I believe it was a couple of years ago, where he went up around with three players around him, went up and got the ball and got it into a touchdown. He was the smallest guy on the field, yet he went up and got it. His ball skills have improved so much as well, and I think that's also something that he adds that you wouldn't expect from a guy his size.
Yeah, his ability to go vertical has definitely improved. I mean, he's always had those legs, and the legs are a big part of being able to out jump guys for sure. But having the body control that he's got now, I mean, to do that, I don't think that's something that he could have always done necessarily in 16 and 17, but now you see, that he's been able to take that tracking ability that I think he's always had with just greater control of his body and being able to put himself into positions. And that's, once again, I mean, that's just not something that most guys in this league can do.
Yeah. And it's a huge thing for Kansas City because now, I talked about this a little bit earlier, Josh Gordon has that same ability. He has the ability to go track. He has the ability to go jump. And he's a lot taller, so he's going to be getting up probably a little bit higher than Tyreek. So you can throw him some of those 50-50 balls and probably not worry about it near as much. I do think that that's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for Patrick Mahomes to find a way to overthrow Josh Gordon on a short route because, yeah, at his size, with his arms and his vertical ability, he can go pretty high. I mean, he and Kelsey are probably neck and neck about who can go the highest over the middle.
Yeah, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And then you add into it other guys that they're adding into the offense and sprinkling in. Noah Gray seemed to get more time on Sunday. Jody Fortson looks like they're getting him involved in the offense. Blake Bell's still there, but I haven't really seen him doing anything offensively other than mostly blocking. But you still have a guy like Fortson, and Ryan and I talked about this I think yesterday. Fortson did some pretty good blocks on Sunday as well.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he's continued to just grow as a player, and I've been really impressed by that. And I think that, I mean, he's by and large, I mean, I think you could arguably say that he's probably put himself into that number 2 tight end spot at this point. I mean, he and Blake Bell are kind of neck for neck, and Noah Gray is continuing to work his way in more and more. I mean, and that's why the Chiefs have just been more comfortable going with some multiple tight end sets that they weren't last year because they just have so many guys there that can make plays. I do have one question with Josh Gordon coming in. I mean, actually, it's 2 questions. One is, where the snap's going to come from, and 2, where's the production? Because it's, one place that's going to be kind of easy is that even though DeMarcus Robinson has been playing a lot of snaps, he's had 1 target through 4 games. I mean, that's definitely.
Has there really only been 1 target?
1 target
for that touchdown?
4 games. Wow. Yeah. So that's something that, I mean, I think D-Rob is definitely going to be somebody who's going to be seeing his snaps change. But then again, I mean, the production, it's going to come from somewhere else. Pretty cool. Honestly, you know what, though? It wouldn't surprise me if it does end up being, Kelsey and Hill that give a little bit. And that's probably not a bad thing because those 2 guys together, I mean, even though so far this season they have both been kind of when one guy's hot, the other one's not, back and forth. But they're 2 of the top receivers in the league, and they've been carrying the majority of the water for this offense. So I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily if both those guys sacrifice a little bit of the numbers for Josh Gordon, because I think they could both use a little bit of a breather. They've done a lot of work through 4 weeks.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I think that when you're looking at how that's going to play out this season, I think it's going to be Kelsey and Hill giving up a little bit of work. But I think that's going to be good for not only to keep mileage off both those players. Kelsey just, like I said, today was his birthday, so he's getting a little bit older. Tyreek Hill getting some mileage off him. He's already running crazy amounts during the entire game, so taking a few less hits would be a good situation for that as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they piece this offense together, and I didn't have any clue that DeMarcus Robinson only had 1 target. So I like that.
Okay. Actually, I have to retract that because I'm going back to make sure I had my numbers. I was apparently looking at the wrong line. So he had no targets on Sunday against the Eagles. but he has had
Okay.
6 catches on the season. So DeMarcus, I have definitely undersold you there.
Okay. Well, and I thought that was a little off. I thought DeMarcus had a couple of plays, but I wasn't going to argue with you because I could have been remembering the year before. So
Sometimes my spreadsheets get off, and
no, I get it.
I trust my spreadsheets too much.
No, you're good.
Sorry,
I
everybody.
understand completely. No, but I do think it's going to be good for Kansas City going forward with the 3 of these guys, the 3-headed monster. And honestly, if you get to the point where you're getting Gordon into a frame of mind and getting him ready for the playoffs, I mean, it doesn't matter if he gets 600 or 700 yards this regular season. If he's ready to go week 1 in the playoffs, that's all that matters. That's when
Yeah,
you really care about it.
exactly. And you've got 13 games to get him up to speed. So there's absolutely no rush whatsoever to me in that regard. Anything that you get is gravy. I think you're going to get a lot of production. Doesn't have to be immediately, but I think you're right. I mean, what you're looking for is get Josh Gordon ready to go in December and January and February, because that's what this signing is really all about.
Yep, and he wants to be here long term from what I've seen put out there. So it's in his best benefit to be ready for big production when the playoffs come. Matt, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Chris, great talking to you, man. Take care.
Hey, you too, bud. Thanks for making the Locked On Chiefs your first listen every day. Now make your second listen to Peacock and Williamson, the NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available on all platforms. Thank you for listening to us today. We will be back with a crossover episode tomorrow with the Locked On Bills, Joe Marino, and we will talk to you then.